As she mentioned, my name is Kameelah Wahid Wilkerson, and I'm honored to be here. Always honored to come to our spiritual spaces and talk about issues of importance. Someone's getting it. That's an important call. So thank you all for being here, for coming to listen to me talk at you maybe for an hour and a half. Not really. That being said, I wanted to hopefully set some ground rules for us this morning. I've been asked to sit. I tend to be a walker and a talker, and I like to move around, but I also like to do more interactive conversations with people. I don't want to lecture. So I'm very, very hopeful that you all will partner with me, collaborate with me in that, and be willing to be interactive, to share your thoughts, share your questions. Yes.
I'm going to have the mic. If anyone just wants to talk, just raise your hand and I'm there for you.
Yes. And also, if you feel nervous about mics and you have a big outside voice like I tend to do, whatever makes you comfortable, and I say that jokingly, but I really want you to be comfortable to please talk with me so that I don't have to fill the space talking to you, because I never really enjoy presentations like that. I always like to, I feel like we learn the most through dialogue. And that's hopefully what I would like to hear, get out of this, or have you get out of this today. I am, as Sarah mentioned, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I don't do private practice because my life itself is very full. I also have a 2.5-year-old who's going through a wild human phase, I like to say. So most of my time is spent in my 9-to-5 job, which I'm also very passionate about, and then spent home with my little wild human. And then I do things like this on the weekends for fun. Actually, this is fun. This is my passion. I love it. And I feel like it's really important that we have open dialogue, especially in our spiritual spaces, because we don't do this enough in terms of talking about things having to do with our social and emotional self. So again, I'm really proud of you and thank you for coming. So that being said, I also would like to just have you tell me your names. You don't have to say more than that. Just tell me your name so that I can maybe, as we start to talk, I really, again, want this to be a comfortable, kind of informal space. So if we'll just start over here with you, sister.
Romana.
Romana. Good morning.
My name is Yasmin.
Yasmin.
First time here.
Welcome.
I have 2 kids that are attending today, and we are actually, my kids go to New Horizon.
Oh, in Pasadena?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to transition out of that.
Uh-huh.
So I just hope my kids come back with good feedback.
Good. Okay. Yasmin, Romana, Yasmin.
My name is Wenda.
Brenda?
Warda.
Warda.
Yeah, I have 3 kids. One is attending here. I have a special needs older kid, and I have a young daughter.
Thank you.
About 18 months old.
Very nice. So you're about to go into the wild human phase, but you've also been through it.
Been there, done that.
Yes. Welcome, Warda.
Geared up for the next stage.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Magda.
Magda? Welcome.
Mariam.
Mariam.
My name is Connie.
Connie. Thank you. Welcome.
My name is
Layla.
Leila.
Layla.
My name is Fuzia.
Hosea. Okay.
My name is Aisha, and I have a 10-month-old.
Aisha. Yay.
Dina.
Dima.
My name is Sada.
Say it again for me. Sada.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Vivian.
Vivian. Okay.
My name is Eram, and I have 3 kids, 2 of which who attend here at okay?
Thank you. Welcome, Adam.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Karen.
Karen.
Nazish.
Nazish.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Bushra. I have 3 kids.
Bushra.
And this is the first time I'm here
Oh.
in Iowa. I came from Mission Viejo, so inshallah, I'm hoping for a good feedback from my kids.
A lot of pressure for the first time kids. Wa alaikum assalam. Welcome, Sandy.
My name is Jamil.
Jamil, welcome.
My name is Horam.
Horam,
My name is Kameelah, and I have a 3-year-old.
say your name again.
Kayam.
Kayam, thank you, welcome.
Ahmed Malik.
Say it again.
Amir.
Amir Malik, thank you.
Shazad. I have
Shazad.
3 children attending Acculturation school.
Yes, Jazad.
Assalamu alaikum. My
Walaikum
name is Nabi.
Nabi, welcome.
My name is Aziz.
Aziz, thank you. Okay. So I feel like it's always easier to maybe relax the environment, starting with your names, and just kind of relax us into hopefully sharing with each other today, because our very first official slide is a sharing activity. So I made a very brief PowerPoint, and then toward the end, maybe I'm going to hand out some information on the topic, which is acculturation and assimilation. How many of you are familiar with this as a topic or a subject, acculturation? A few of you? Okay. So I'm going to hand out some information on the 4 common stages of acculturation, and then on the back it has strategies for coping with acculturation stress. And hopefully we'll do that. Is going to be one of the activities that I hope that we can do together this morning. So our goals for this morning is to define acculturation, assimilation, and the acculturation gap, which is really the focus of our talk today. So we'll define that. Next, we want to examine the impact of the effort to acculturate or assimilate on Muslim youth and families. And then lastly, brainstorm effective strategies in managing possible familial acculturation gaps. So these are the goals for our time today. So this next slide is going to be an image, very simple image, and I want you to take maybe 1 minute to think about this image, and if you have paper and pen, write down immediately what comes up for you. And like I said, it's a simple image, but I want to encourage you to think about it with a little bit more depth as well. And then we want to spend some time, hopefully, talking with each other about what this image brings up for us. What do we think is happening in that image, okay? So, what does this bring up for you? Yes, please.
Trying to change ourselves to fit in to what we think is normal.
Okay, so trying to change ourselves to fit into what we think is normal. What else? What does this bring up for you? Yes.
Masking your identity to blend in.
Masking identity to blend in. What else? Yes.
So it could be what they said, but then you're not trying yourself, but it just happens because of
The environment, it's happening. So far we've heard from people that we are doing this, or maybe our children are doing this, but from what I hear you saying is that it's just happening naturally in our environment.
I think they said, but you're not doing it purposely.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Others? Yes.
I guess allowing others to change who you are to fit in.
So allowing other people to change who you are. More, give me more.
If you guys all want to come to the front, so
Yeah.
we can all be more interactive.
Please come forward. Gentlemen, what do you guys have to? What do you think about this image?
Not all the apples are green.
Not all apples are green? Yeah. And is that okay? Okay. So not all apples are green. Other thoughts, gentlemen? So talk to me, how do you, yes, go ahead.
Like it's the same, I think the same idea, but it looks like it's enforced, more force on the person.
Uh-huh.
Because it's the external force that's doing it.
Okay.
So it feels like, the person is forced into it.
Okay, so they're forced into it. Okay. What does it bring up for you in terms of, let's connect with our feelings about this. So we can think about this, kind of look at it, have very logical, heady response, but let's connect with our heart. What does this feel like for you? Uncomfortable? Say more about that.
Well, I feel like, as she said, it's not free will. So when someone is, or the society in general, is trying to change you, I think that the person holds a little bit of responsibility to it too.
Uh-huh.
It's not just, you can't just blame the environment, you also have a little bit of control.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a complex combination of,
Could you speak a little closer?
I think it's a little bit more complex,
Okay.
but it's not who you are.
Yeah. And so let's connect back to that feeling space where you said that it's uncomfortable. Why is it uncomfortable?
Because, you're a red apple. So, for instance, now, apple is obviously just a symbol. You get to that stage, there's different type, at least, from the look of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just, it seems like someone else is holding the paintbrush, so you're getting changed
Uh-huh.
to something else. but
Yeah.
You're not. So there's a lot of conflict.
Yeah. Okay.
That you have to overcome. And
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Other feelings that this brings up for you? Gentlemen, at least one of you has to talk to me about your feelings. Yes.
To me, it looks like the physical assimilation or blending is not the solution.
Uh-huh.
You're trying to assimilate physically and try to disguise your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, your identity is your existence. So
Yes.
when you try to disguise that and assimilate in a physical way or physical form, you're kind of like being hypocritical.
Okay. So how do you feel about that? Does it make you angry? Does it make you sad? Does it make you uncomfortable?
It does make you uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
It's like you have that inner struggle
Yes.
that you're fighting, especially if you didn't, I'm just going to talk in general.
Yes.
If you didn't grow in a community that you don't belong to from the first time,
Mm-hmm.
it is hard for you to strike that balance between your identity and the mainstream
Right.
identity. So that's when it creates a struggle,
An internal struggle.
inner conflict
Mm-hmm.
in your personal life.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Brother Aziz, was it? Thank you. And Yasmin, right? No, Yasmin. Warda. Okay. Other feelings. Don't be shy. This is a safe space.
This apple skin never keeps this color forever. It's meant to be.
The apple is meant to be red, so even if it's painted green, it can't keep that color forever. What is that? Can you connect that to more of a...
If you try to change somebody in your assimilation in your society, eventually what he is or she is, will eventually come out.
Yeah.
No matter what.
So there's some stress associated with trying to be a green apple when you're a red apple, and eventually that red apple is just going to kind of bleed through.
Because the skin of that apple is never meant to be painted on.
Okay. Other thoughts or reflections on this?
You're too sweet. Red apple is sweet.
Red apples are sweeter and green ones are sour. Well, you know what? I like that actually, because it says something about, finding peace in who you are. And red apples are sweeter and more delicious, and, green apples tend to be more sour. I'm not saying anything about greenness out there. If we think of it more broadly in terms of assimilating to another culture. But there is a sweetness in being your true self and being who you are. There's some honesty and comfort in that. Okay, other reflections. So Warda mentioned, or someone mentioned, I think it was Warda, that someone else is holding the paintbrush. I want to hear from you all. How many of you think that someone else is holding the paintbrush in this picture? I see one hand, thank you. What do you think about who's holding this paintbrush? Yes. Society is holding this paintbruch?
Society is trying to form you all to be the same, but you are different, then they're going to try to form you to be the same.
Okay. So this is sounding like what was your name again? Aisha. This is sounding like it is an external process that's happening, that's being forced on anyone. Any other thoughts about that in terms of who's holding the paintbrush? Could it be something? Yes. Hold. Let me get the mic because you have a soft, dainty voice. I can't hear you.
In some of the families, they are trying to be holding, like the parents themselves trying to hold that brush.
Yes.
They don't be in trouble, like they want to be, mixed with other parties.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because this is one of the things that I want us to think about in terms of expanding our mind about how we think about acculturation and assimilation. Could this be a family of apples and the parents are holding the paintbrush? What are your thoughts about that?
That's a good explanation to the picture.
Yeah, it could be a family of apples. So we immediately, a lot of us, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us see this picture and we externalize it like this is happening, to us. But could we be the ones where we are painting this brush on our children versus allowing them or encouraging them to be their sweet red apple selves? Could this be the child or a youth or ourselves holding our own paintbrush? Yes.
I think it is always happening for like child himself or herself trying to paint himself. But yeah, so I think it's cases like 99% they try to do that so that they have, they don't have comfort. They always have comfort zone out there in schools or colleges.
Yes. Okay. So the takeaway from this as we start to move on is just to really expand your minds in terms of who's holding that brush and what's happening. And there's so many different, acculturation, assimilation is such a complex topic that even researchers and scientists don't agree on all different researchers and people who study this have different names for the stages. It's such a complex issue. And so I want us to think about it from a sense of it could be something that is happening externally in terms of society is putting this pressure on our youth and on us as individuals to acculturate or assimilate or get some level of sameness. But it could be our children. It could be our youth, that is what they desire. to have some level of sameness. It could be our families that want our children to, have some level of sameness within the family. So just think about that in a more complex way in terms of how that impacts, or when we talk about the stress related to acculturating or assimilating within a culture. Okay? Any final thoughts before we move on? Okay. So I want to define, I've been using these words, so I want to take a moment to define them. I know that some of you raised your hand that you have some experience with this topic or some understanding around this topic. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, acculturation is a cultural modification of an individual, group, or people by adapting to or borrowing traits from another culture, typically the dominant one. Assimilation is to absorb into the cultural tradition of a population or group. And then acculturation gap is where youth and their parents are in different stages of acculturation. Okay? So a lot of times when we hear these terms, assimilation, there's some negative connotation associated with it. We also think about it being something that is maybe forced on us or forced on our youth. But I'd like to also encourage you to think about these in a positive way, because they don't have to be negative terms. So for individuals who are joining another culture. And when we think about culture, a lot of times we tend to think of the more traditional aspects of culture, but really it's any person that is going to be integrating into a group or a situation where there is a level of difference for that individual. And so it could be some of your youth are coming to IOK for the first time. They are going to have to acculturate and assimilate into the culture of IOK. What is expected here? What are the rules here? What do they, when do they, when do they need to arrive? When do they go from place to place? So this is something also to think about when we talk about acculturation, as it just in its pureness is integration into another group where there is a level of difference and sameness. Okay? All right. So there are four generally agreed upon stages of acculturation, and I'll hand this out to you later. And earlier I said that researchers and scientists don't agree on the names of the different stages, but at its core, these are the stages of acculturation that people generally go through. And they go through them at different paces and different times and in different ways. So we think about that in terms of time, meaning, actual temporal time, years, months, etc. And then just in terms of the stages and the flow through these, an individual's flow through these stages just happens on a unique level. So that's something that's important to know. So that first stage is euphoria and excitement. You're new and everything is awesome. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lego movie where everything is awesome. That's what I think about when I think about euphoria and excitement. You're in a new place. Let's say your kids are in, IOK and they're so excited and everything is so interesting and awesome and they're, just really happy to be here. There tends to be a superficial level of involvement, like you really immerse yourself into, the culture and what's going on around you. And there's just, again, a lot of interest in learning and trying to understand what's happening in this new culture, whatever that culture may be. You have a sense of like, I am on top of the world. I can handle everything. I know what's happening. They're very confident and excited about in this first level of acculturation. The next stage is generally agreed to be a culture shock, where there's some time has passed, and again, that time is relative to the individual. And when we talk about culture shock, it's kind of like being between cultures and just not understanding what's happening. And so the example is like, what is wrong with these people? What is wrong with this place? I don't understand what's going on. The novelty has worn off, and you really start to see the differences. Like, oh, they do this here, at IOK, and I'm not really sure, because it wasn't like this at New Horizons. Or they are, they experience these differences on a very big level where it's like, this is a catastrophe, like, oh, the world is ending. It's just really, they're in a sense of shock between the two cultures. It's no longer like everything is roses and this is a wonderful place to be. Now it's like, I don't know what's happening, what I'm doing here, okay? The next level is, some people call it gradual adjustment. Some people call it integration, where there starts to be a balance, where you start to develop a balance between, and the general feel is like, I'm okay, everything's okay. Right? Because you start to be able to integrate, hold on to aspects of your previous culture or your home culture, as well as integrate or pull in pieces of the new culture or the new place or the new experience. So there starts to be an equilibrium there. And then the last stage is consider assimilation, adaptation, and in some situations, biculturalism. So you're able to be both. You're able to not just be, from this culture, and these are, people over here from this different culture. You are a happy harmony of both. And that is what is considered assimilation or adaptation, where you're like home, sweet home, like you found your happy place, your peaceful place. Any thoughts or questions about these stages? Does this feel familiar to any of you or to what you might have experienced with your youth? Any thoughts on that? I see someone nodding. Anyone want to share? No? Yes. Okay. Okay. So gradual equilibrium is like you're coming to a place of peace and you're starting to integrate. So you're starting to figure things out in the sense of like, okay, it's all right to be me, red apple, and also like these green apple things. And then 4 is, this is who I am. I am a red and green apple, or I am a red apple in a green apple world. Like you are like kind of set. It's, if you think about it that way. So the third level is like the cake is settling into its space. And then in the 4th level, the cake is baked. Does that make more sense? Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. So let's have, this is another discussion area. And I really want to spend some time here because this is really hopefully the meat of what we want to talk about today in terms of what are some of the challenges that we face, that our youth face with acculturation and assimilation. So there's a couple questions here, and I want to think about number 1. So who is impacted by this? Who's impacted by acculturation and assimilation? Everybody meaning like, what does that mean? Like everybody in the world or, children, families, parents? What does that mean?
Anybody can be a subject of acculturation.
Mm-hmm.
You move from one domain to another domain, from one area to another area,
Mm-hmm.
Geographically or ethnically.
Geographically, ethnically.
Linguistically.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Aspect to it.
Okay. Other thoughts? I heard some rumblings over here.
It depends on how you're looking at it.
Yes.
If you're looking at it from dominant culture to minority culture,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're looking at it in a family.
Yes, and that's what I want us to discuss, exactly that.
So if you're looking at it from just an overarching cultural viewpoint, a minority culture, the individual or a group of people that are going through this process, they're going to be more affected.
Right.
In a family dynamic, it's a constant back and forth process.
Mm-hmm.
Because, say, parents are trying to introduce some of their cultural values to their kids, and kids who did not have the opportunity to grow in the parents' ancestral culture,
Mm-hmm.
they're also, part of the mainstream culture as much as the majority culture, but at the same time, they have to kind of adopt
Mm-hmm.
the parents' culture. So in that environment, I feel like it's parents learn to get some skills from their kids,
Yep.
and the kids get some skills or the cultural norms from the parents, and it's a constant back and forth struggle.
Yeah.
Or I would not say struggle, I would say it's a progress,
Mm-hmm.
because both of these two different, I would say two different opposites or different standards are going to come together, and they're going to come to a equilibrium, that, as you were saying. So integration is going both ways.
Right.
So I feel like
Okay.
it depends on how you're looking at it.
Right. And so one of the questions that I think about when I look at this, or some of the things I think about when I look at this question is, typically we associate acculturation and assimilation with the immigration process. Does it have to be associated with the immigration process?
No.
Say more about that. Why not? Yes.
I mean, for example, I was born here,
Yeah.
but I definitely remember going through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
My parents moved here, and I'm sure they struggled. They had a hard time. But for us too, because our parents are telling us we're something different. We're going to school here, and that's all we've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to adapt and everything was pretty difficult.
Right.
So I don't think it's just that. I think it could be honestly anything.
Yeah.
It even comes to like gender
Mm-hmm.
or
Absolutely.
color, or it could be anything.
Right. Yes.
So
And that's, again, my goal is to have us think outside the box when it comes to thinking about this, because, initially when I approached it, it was like, well, this is an immigration issue when we have individuals who immigrate from other places, but it's not really. I also was born and raised here from, a history of, Black families from the South. And I seriously went through this in terms of all of us, and maybe our children are going to go through this just based on the fact that they're Muslim, right? So regardless of where they're born, they are, being Muslim and also being in our dominant culture, which is not a Muslim place. They will have to deal with this. So they may be dealing with this on multiple levels, right? So for me, I mentioned that, example, I have a 2.5-year-old, and I just put him in preschool this week for the first time. And I got the little packet home, and they're like, Christmas pictures are going to be on November the 5th. And I said, are they? The theme is Christmas. And I said, is it going to be a Christmas theme or a winter theme? Because we don't celebrate Christmas. So there's, always going to be that element of the push and pull between cultures. And so, again, we need to just think outside the box when we think about acculturation and assimilation, because it's not just an immigrant issue. And when I was doing my research, most of it is around, like, this is an immigration issue. People come from another country or they go to another country. But it's any time that there's a level of difference, where there is a dominant group of sameness or a dominant group of differentness, we have to consider that this might be an issue. Yes?
And also, acculturation is just not cultural norms.
Mm-hmm.
It could be simply socioeconomic status.
Yes.
If you grew up rich and
Yeah.
you're not in a financially feasible situation.
Yes.
Or if you grew up poor.
Yep.
And it could be educational difference too.
Mm-hmm.
If you came from a family where there were not as many educational expectations, and now you went ahead and you got education, and you're putting your kids in an environment where there are higher educational expectations. So it could be anything.
Yes.
It's just not the cultural norms.
Right.
It could be any
Yes.
factor that could affect the difference.
And in that, it pushes us to broaden our definition of culture. Because again, when we think of culture, we tend to think of, ethnically, culture. But families have cultures. Schools have cultures. So culture is just a broader, aspect. Another way to think about it is if you have a young person that is going to go away to college, they will have to acculturate out of their family culture into, and depending on if that is a small school or community or a large school or community. So there's different ways that we can think about it. And the goal of that is for us to be prepared to handle the different ways in which our children, our youth are going to be expected to acculturate or assimilate so that we're better prepared for that, okay? So next question, is this necessary? Do we have to do it? Do the apples have to be painted green? Yes.
I don't think they have to be painted green, but I think that...
You want to pass her that? Yeah.
So I do think that the process is important.
Mm-hmm.
For you to figure out who you are as a person,
Yes.
where you fit in, how you want to live your lifestyle, how it affects everybody around you. I think going through that process is very necessary.
Yes. Good. I would agree with that. I think that, and the reason why I bring this up is I want to encourage, again, thinking about it very broadly in terms of acculturation and assimilation, is that this is an expectation, whether we like it or not. That process is going to happen. And how do we kind of, stand, stoically against that process, or do we allow that process to happen, being aware that, that this is going on and being prepared to help our child, our youth, navigate that process, as well as we have to navigate that process, because this may be a challenge for us as well. So this process, it's necessary. It is going to happen, right? And so it's really important for us, again, to not fight it, to, go along with it, but go along with it in a way that's also respectful to us, our family culture, and our ethnic culture, our religious culture. So we have to be able to figure out a way to balance. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, do some little group activity next, okay? So let's talk about challenges and stressors. Let's dig into this. Like, what's the big deal? What is the issue? What are some of the challenges and stressors that result from trying to go through this process, from trying to acculturate and assimilate? What do our youth go through? What do we go through? Think about this from an individual perspective, a familial perspective, social, religious, cultural perspective. Just tell me, what are some of the challenges and stressors we might have, or our youth may have? Yes.
Sometimes you really want to protect your children from everything around wrong.
Yes.
But you don't have the financial to put them in Islamic schools, for example. Or
yes.
Not send them to public school.
Yes. So one of the challenges from a parental perspective is that you want to protect them. You want to put that buffer around them, but you may not have, in this specific example, some of the financial resources to protect them from the dangers of public school, right? What else? What are some other challenges? Yes.
For mine, it's the opposite. I had my kids in Islamic school till middle school,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're starting public school and high school. So now they have to get used to this whole new culture of public school.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I'm stressed because I'm like, are they going to make the right decisions? And
Yes.
they're confused too because now it's like they're not around Muslims all the time, but like they used to be.
Yes.
So that's, they have challenges and I have challenges trying to help them make the right choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes. Was it Connie?
Where do you draw the line? Like between allowing them to be themselves and explore and navigate, and between you, not enforcing, but trying to push your family values on them,
Right.
religious values.
Where do you draw the line? How do you determine, this is my hard stopping point? versus just allowing them, because we don't want them to just roam free and just, run the streets and do their own thing. Well, like, yeah, well, they're assimilating. I'm going to find peace with that. No, we don't want to do that. So, yeah, figuring out where you need to be. Yes, thank you for sharing. Good point. Yes.
Social media?
Oh, tell me about that. Say more about that.
So the kids have gotten used to that every kid has to have a phone and
Yes.
how to limit the amount of exposure and how to control it.
Yes, I don't get into many Facebook arguments, but I did get into a recent Facebook argument about parental controls on a phone, where a parent said they had to be friends with their child on social media so that they could go in, and another parent was like, well, that's an invasion of their privacy and such and such and such. And so, yeah, I dove into that pool, and that was not great. But yeah, social media, I mean, there are so many. We could do, that would maybe one of the parenting sessions if you haven't already done it. The challenges of social media, managing social media, because there is so much that goes with that. And what age do they, I know that a lot of people, and I'm not judging, a lot of people, like, their children have Facebook accounts, and they like have their pictures, and people have Facebook accounts for their pets, and I'm not judging, maybe a little bit. But there's just social media has just kind of gone off the rails in terms of the level of access and information that is out there. I'm actually on a Facebook fast right now, because every time I open it up, it's just like, this person has died. This person, abused these animals. This person, or this is happening. And it's just too much access and saturation. And so it is a definite challenge in terms of putting boundaries and limits on social media, and then what they're allowed to see and how they engage in. Such a huge, we can talk all day about social media. So yes, thank you. Yes.
I think boundaries not only vary with family, sometimes boundaries also change with a kid. So
yes.
It's not like, and it's tough for a parent
yes.
to be consistent with all their kids, but at the same time, each child's maturity levels is different from the other one, or one may be more responsible, the other one may not be. So it's a difficult journey for a parent.
That's difficult for the parent, and then that's difficult for all of the children, right? So my sister, I have an older sister who is 12 and a half years older than me, and she will never, ever, ever let me forget the fact that my mother allowed me to try out for the cheerleading squad. She's just like, you got to do that. And of course, I didn't make it because I was wholly unprepared for that. But I did get to be one of the, flag girls, because they had to wear the long sleeves and had to wear the long, the skirts, and they weren't, all so overexposed. But she will never let me forget that you got to do that. I didn't get to do that, right? Because those boundaries change as we age and as our children age, and we look at them in terms of their maturity levels differently. And then let's talk about gender. Let's not. And how are those boundaries different for boys and for girls, right? We don't have to go into it, but we know that it exists, right? So that is a great point. So that is a stressor or a challenge for the parent as well as for the children themselves.
The research has shown that the way the parenting style of parents changes with the order of the child you have. So in general, and I'm speaking in general terms, the firstborn has it tough because parents themselves are not sure what works and what doesn't.
Right.
And if they raise a good firstborn, as you have other kids, your parenting style may get lax, or if your
more permissive
turn out to be not so great, then you become stricter. So it affects how, what order the child is in a set of kids.
Yes.
And the parenting style varies with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I'm firstborn, so I can understand your sister's concern, because I didn't do a lot of stuff that younger siblings did. And it's just, and also the times have changed.
Yes.
So what worked for me and my parents when I was at that stage didn't work for my younger siblings. The society was constantly changing.
Right.
When I grew up, we did not have social media, but when my youngest sibling was growing up, social media was a factor. So then parents have to, adapt to it.
Yes, parents have to adapt and learn and grow. Yes. Other challenges. Gentlemen, you've been quiet for a while.
Schools, for me as a parent, as a father. Sending kids to school, and then when they come back, they're asking, we have a Christmas on this Saturday, we have a bunny, like eggs hunting, all those things.
Yes.
And so as a parent, I usually say, okay, fine. I mean, again, I have set boundaries with them, Fine, we don't have a Christmas tree, but we can have a lights in the house. Because I don't want it to not be part of the culture.
Yeah.
It's a dominant culture.
Yes.
They're gonna I want to raise in another country. But this is their country.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't want to be away from their culture. Not culture, mostly the religion. I don't want to think about Pakistani American. I want to think American Muslim.
Yes.
For me, I'm a Pakistani American. But for them, it's American Muslim.
Yes.
So I want them to have that. Yes, we have a Christmas, but we don't celebrate. But I can put lights in the house, but no Christmas tree. So I can set a boundary, but maybe as a parent, I really have to work hard as compared to other religions.
Yeah.
That's a fear for me, because I don't want them to be fully Americanized.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't want them to just be a Pakistani American. I want them to be American, but at the same time to be just Muslim. So that's a fear. I still have that fear. I have 9-year-old, I have 6-year-old.
I do too.
It's a 8-day training. I used to send my son to a birthday, and he can stay there for 2 hours alone. But since my daughter was 6-year-old now, I stopped that rule. I mean, it's the rule now for both of them. No more, you cannot go there alone. You have to have with us. One of us have to be there.
Yes.
It's just because my daughter was 6-year-old, she'd want to go also to a birthday party by herself, to her friend's house, because she thinks if my brother goes, why not I?
Yes.
So I have to set a rule now. So the same rule for both of them.
Yes.
Another example, so you're taking time, but another example, like
no,
my son,
please.
In summer, when he was like 4 or 5-year-old, he used to have without shirt, just a short, and he was running to the house.
Yeah.
And my daughter was 3-year-old at that time, and she wanted to do the same thing.
Yes.
So I say my wife, now I think that's the current problem, so there's a rule in the house now, because my son's going to have shirt.
Everyone wears shirts.
So now you understand. So it's a fear. It's a fear.
Yes, absolutely.
We're still working hard towards, make them good American Muslim.
Yes.
Not a Pakistani, but
such stress. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That is excellent. It's stressful, right? So it's not just, you have the stresses of just, you have the stresses of just raising children, right? They're not going to topple off the stairs or burn their hand on the stove. And then you have the added stressors of raising an American Muslim child, or if that was important to you, a Pakistani American Muslim child, right? And trying to hold on to your values in terms of the values of your culture or your ethnic group, as well as the values of just being Muslim in a world that is so stressful. I remember going through the same thing, and why can't we have a tree? I don't understand why we can't have a tree. Everyone has a tree. And just that, I'm dreading that conversation as it comes up, as my son gets older. But yeah, that is definitely a challenge for us as parents, as well as for our children, being different in that way. Like, why aren't you in the Christmas program? Or, why aren't you going to the Easter egg hunt? Or why you don't have lights on your house? Everybody on your street, on your block, on my block, has lights up. Why don't you, right? Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Other challenges or stressors that we face, and I've heard a lot from the parents' perspective. What about our youth? What are some of the challenges our youth face when they are in that acculturation process? We got to talk about it so we're prepared for it. Yes.
I think one of them, probably the biggest one, is the feeling of being left out.
Yeah.
Not feeling like you just do not fit in.
Yes. Right.
And that's hard. I have a almost 9-year-old, and she's like, why can't I wear shorts?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, all my friends wear sleeveless, and you know, it's a struggle for sure to explain that to her. I mean, she's getting it. She's pretty smart, but I can tell that she feels very left out.
Yes.
You know. So
yeah.
I think that's like,
Thank you. Other challenges or stressors our youth face? Yes.
Speaking on what she was saying, I think that the biggest struggle is that we're going to feel left out because we're not from a dominant religious group. There will always be activities that are going to be happening that we can't relate to. That for me, I think growing up, one of the struggles was being proud of who I am and having that confidence to be okay being different, and that's very hard to instill, especially when you're little.
Yes.
And your identity is still constantly being formed. So it's hard to trust yourself and happy being who you are. And as a kid growing up, that's challenging.
I'm just going to I want to write that down because I'm going to save that point for our activity. Here's my notepad. Trusting yourself and trusting that it's okay to be different or to be a red apple and everyone else is green. Trusting yourself, that's good. And how do we, when we get to that point, how do we as parents, what do we do to build that trust in our youth? That because everybody's a little different, right? And that it's okay for them to be different, and it's okay. I wish I had a conversation. A friend of mine shared something on Facebook that his daughter, who is 6, went to school for the first day, and they got up and they had to share something about themselves. And she says, my name is Ella. I'm 6 years old, and the thing I love most about myself is my chocolatey brown skin. And I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did you instill that pride and that trust in her that she's able to stand in front of this classroom and say, I love my chocolatey brown skin, right? That's what I want us to talk about when we get to that segment. Like, what can we do as parents to build that trust and that confidence in our youth?
And I think it starts from the parents themselves.
Yes.
So we all have different cultural backgrounds. Even if you're born here, raised here, there are subsets of cultures. So I think as a parent, you have to show them an example. We need to be proud of who we are.
Yes.
What background we come from.
Yes.
And then the kids say, okay, my parents are happy and confident being who they are. They're different. So then maybe we can be like that. So it starts from there, and then we transfer the confidence and prepare them for life situations where their confidence is going to be challenged.
Yes.
But at the same time, doing it in a fun and interactive way, not like training.
Right. Yes.
Challenging.
Yeah. Sure. Tell me a few more challenges that our youth face. Thank you for that. Other challenges that our young people face. Yes.
An example. I have 9-year-old. He comes in IQ, and his question is, why I have to go on the weekend to school?
Yes.
And so, as a parent, I have to give a logical answer. Because I cannot just say, we're Muslim, we have to go.
Yes.
So, we have a neighbor, they're Christian, of course, and his name is Isaac. Same old, same age. So I give example. He goes to Sunday, every Sunday.
Yeah.
For church, church service. So I, sometimes I have to convince them. So just because that example, luckily Isaac goes to Sunday church. So I told him that, then I explained about the religion, that we are different religion, we have to learn something about our religion. And so that Isaac goes on Sunday for church. So we go on Saturday for our mosque,
yes.
to learn.
Yes.
So that was a challenge, and for him to convince why we have to go on the weekends? Weekends supposed to be fun. And sometimes as a parent, I have to reward him, and I'm still rewarding him. After Saturday school, we go to Starbucks.
Yes.
We just go to a park. We just go to the beach from here right away. So and that's what I'm doing for the last couple of years. Not every Saturday, but kind of reward.
Yes.
So we're doing something extra beside raising here, something extra, working studying on Saturday school. So that's a challenge and a fear, but it's a constant thing. I'm ready for that. We are ready for that. But just a learning.
Yeah. Thank you.
So go ahead.
Thank you. I want you to consider, in again, thinking about how we're going to move forward with our youth, take a minute to kind of coming back to your earlier point of just the stressors that we have. Number one, trying to raise children, right? And then number two, trying to raise, good Muslim, American Muslim, just raising a good person. And let's also think about the stress that our young people are under, especially if you do have, and I think a lot of you, the majority of you do have young people that are in public school, right? And that's why you're here on the weekends, trying to make sure that they have a good foundation. But consider the stressors that they are under on a daily basis, not only at school, but if you allow them to watch TV, right? That is a stressor in of itself in terms of like the commercials that they see, the products that they see, the shows that they see, the clothes that even if they're watching, the good children shows, the clothes that they're wearing, the different levels of freedom that they have, and the stressors that our youth are experiencing, and allow us to, as we navigate those waters, really come from a place of compassion, and kind of considering those stressors, and then let that guide our responses with our young people. Okay. So what are some of let's talk about the positives. What are some of the protective factors? What are some of the ways in which our children are protected as they go through this acculturation process? And the reason I like to talk about this is because I want to build those up. So if you hear something from someone that you're not doing and you're like, I'm going to try that with my child, that gives you another tool in your tool belt to be able to navigate this process with your child. So what are some of the protective factors? Yes. Yes. Having an extended support system, extended family that they can meet up with every week. Yes. What others? Yes. Yes.
Making our holidays beautiful, such as bringing lights and making the Eid.
Yes.
Beautiful.
I cannot stress that enough, and I will go on a soapbox when it comes to that in terms of. And I don't mean it in a judgmental way if that's something that you're doing, but it's a lot of times it's challenging when those Eid holidays fall on a weekday and they're school days. And I'm like, take your kids out of school. Like, they need to celebrate. Like, this is what we have, right? And so I completely agree with that in terms of we need to make our holidays, our celebrations, the different ones, beautiful and exciting and interesting to them. I remember growing up, it was always, I don't know if any of you were a part of that, but we always went to the Eid prayers at USC. And did any of you go to those Eid prayers growing up at USC? Oh man, it was like a holiday. Getting up in the morning and getting dressed and feeling really excited about it and caravanning. We lived in Pasadena, across the freeway, and seeing all the Muslims and being there was always such a source of joy. And we really need to build that up. We can't let it be like, oh, it's just another day. We really need to make sure that we are honoring our holidays so that our kids are happy about them as well. What else? What other protective factors? Yes?
I think it's really important to have some communication, to make it at least once a day, sit down at the dinner table, for instance, have dinner, and be able to talk to them openly and go through what they have gone through the day, stressors, challenges,
yes.
the things that have happened.
Yeah. So having some open channel of communication, be it sitting down over a meal, and something that I would suggest often, our young people don't like don't direct or intrusive ways for us to like, you know, literally like, tell me about your day. They're like, whatever, mom, or whatever, dad, right? But we have to figure out ways to kind of go around that and be more indirect about taking interest, you know, in their day and having a set maybe time or where we communicate. Maybe it is, you know, every Sunday or every Saturday after we leave Saturday school, we're driving to Starbucks, we have a conversation about the week, or we sit in the park and before you run and play, tell me something awesome about your week or something challenging about your week. So definitely communication, and communication for you in terms of like, it's my hope that again, you're thinking about these things, these topics deeply, and that allows you to then reflect in the communication you have with your young people. Yes?
One of the things that I noticed in most of the massages that I go to, my masjid is in La Morada. It's a small masjid. But what I notice is this: there's not a lot of things for kids or youth to come for.
Yeah.
Except there is a family night.
Yes.
There is Eid prayer or some celebration. But rather than that, there is no activities for the kids. There's no activities for the youth. So I encourage all the people that are responsible, the board members and the people that are running these massages, to look for ways to attract these kids and these youth.
Yes.
Things that we may not think that are important to attract the kids. There's competition, sports competition. There's a lot of things that we have to think out of the box. You know, not necessarily physical things. It could be like cultural events. It could be we don't even have the structure in the massages to attract this type of the kids and the youth.
Yes.
And my kids, for example, when we go to the masjid, like in Ramadan, so we go every Saturday, Sunday, and Friday. And they always, I notice when on Monday, they say, are we going today? No, we're going on Friday.
Right.
Are we going tomorrow? So no,
Yes.
we're going to go on the weekend.
Yes.
So because they go, they enjoy, they play with the kids, they are one. That's the environment they know. So unless we create this environment for the kids to, keep them in touch with our Islamic beliefs and culture, they will drift away.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we find that also in our community in Pasadena where, Ramadan, everybody's all fired up and the kids are happy and wonderful. And then it drifts and we're like, where are the children? We don't have any children. We have tons of children. And so I would say, I would also push back on that a little bit actually and say that it begins with you. A lot of times we put a lot of responsibility on our leadership and on the boards, create this program and do this. And like you heard, maybe I've been on the board for a while and I've just had a child. He's only 2. So up until then, it wasn't really like I wasn't invested in, I don't really know what to do. Now that I have a 2-year-old. No, yeah, me too. Because now I'm like, okay, I got to do something. I got to do something. I got to find some activities because, the baby, he's going to go to public school probably, and he's going to be lost. Like, I'm catastrophizing already. And it has to be important to us. Like, we have to do it. We have to, and I completely agree with you. We got to think outside the box because, it's Ramadan and it's exciting and they love being here. But we also have to feel comfortable with the fact that they may not love being here all the time, right? And so we may have to engage in what they call separate spaces or middle grounds where we do things outside of the community, but we are building that community with them. Yes, other protective factors. Oh, sorry. Yes, being a role model as a parent. Yes. Yes.
So I think being a role model for myself first.
Yes.
Then I expect, they follow me. Just teach them, communicate them. Like sister said, communication is very important.
Yes.
In this nowadays world, there's no way you can just take kids and just go and pray. You have to show them why we pray. What's the benefit for them?
Yes.
So if I have the knowledge, so I can share with them. If myself, I don't have the knowledge about prayer, Islam, and religion, there's no way I can communicate with them. So I have to be myself first,
Yes.
Not a perfect Muslim, but be a good Muslim at least, so I can show them how to be a Muslim.
Yes,
So
thank
being
you.
a role model is first thing.
Thank you. What were you saying, Warda? Sorry.
I was saying that in terms of creating activities, a lot of mosques don't have the structure, but if you're thinking out of the box, parents can go for a picnic.
Yes.
They can meet somewhere. It doesn't have to be this masjid
Yes.
where everybody meets. And in Ramadan, because everybody's coming for fast and Tarawih, you tend to come there. But outside of Ramadan, everybody has their own schedule
Yes.
and commitments. So I think one thing as a Muslim community, no matter which city we're in, maybe make an initiative of just getting the parents together or going for a picnic or a cookout. I grew up in South Mississippi. We don't have the same resources that we do have in here.
Yes.
And the community is much smaller. It's much bigger now. Back then, it used to be really small. So we had to think out of the box too. And we had to organize my parents. I mean, we were the recipient of it. Our parents and our community members, we had to see how we could engage the youth, do activities that are not chained to masjid or Islamic institutes, because a lot of communities here in Southern California won't have the same resources.
Right.
So it takes a lot from the individual, like families. We have to dedicate a lot of our time that we could have been doing something fun.
Yeah.
And as kids, sometimes we protested that, it's my weekend, I want to hang out with my friends or do other stuff, but in the long run, it worked out.
Yeah.
So.
And part of that is we have to make the commitment ourselves. If this aspect of our culture or our religion, whatever it might be, that is maybe suffering in this acculturation process, if that aspect is important to us, we model that, then we can make a commitment to it so that we can create ways in which it's important to our youth. Okay. Yes, a couple more. Any others before we move on?
I wanna share a little anecdote from my little niece. About 5 years ago, they came from the Middle East. And one time they came to our house to visit us, and she was singing Santa Claus is coming to town. And then I told her, who taught you that song? Oh, at school. We all singing Santa Claus is coming to town. And because it's
everywhere.
Everywhere. You go to the store,
Yes.
you're listening to the music all the time that you're inside the store. Go to the supermarket, same thing. Everywhere you go, even in the school. And then I told her, do you know who's Santa Claus? Oh yeah, Santa Claus is gonna bring a lot of toys to us. I said, do you know who's Santa Claus? And then she goes, it's a big fat man with a long beard and white hair, and he's gonna bring a lot of toys to school. I said, you know what? Santa Claus is just a man. Santa Claus doesn't exist. Let me tell you the real story of Santa Claus.
Oh, well.
Santa Claus is a man, okay? And it's a made-up story. It's not real, okay? And she was 3 back then. And then I says, no, this is real. And the school has told us, he's gonna bring a lot of toys to school. I said, well, Santa Claus is just a man, okay? And the people that are going to buy the toys is the people that work in the school is going to buy the toys, and the man that is gonna come dressed up like Santa Claus is just a man, okay? He said no, because they said that Santa Claus is gonna bring toys to Jesus Christ. I said, oh, that's a different story. You know what? When Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, he wasn't, Santa Claus didn't exist. You know, when Santa Claus, when Jesus Christ was born, Santa Claus didn't exist, okay? Santa Claus is a story that it was made up, okay, but it's not real. Okay, let me tell you the real story of Jesus Christ, okay? And because we are Muslims, we believe Jesus Christ, and then I told her a short story about, you know, the 3-year-old, you know, at their level of understanding. And then she was, oh, and you know, like surprise. He says, oh, but they said he's gonna bring a lot of toys. I said, you know what? If you want toys, you can ask your mom and dad to buy you toys. But you know, don't believe that because it's not real.
Yeah.
It's not real. Over in the school, they are telling us that. I say yes, but you know what? In the school, sometimes they tell us stories, but it's just a story. You need to learn a little bit more. And you know what? Ask your parents. Ask your parents to tell you more about the whole story. And then she was, oh, okay, I will ask my mom and dad. So as parents, probably if we educate ourselves, you know, and don't be afraid to tell your kids the real story,
the truth,
of where all those stories are coming from, then our kids are not going to feel, you know, like weird.
Yes.
But they believe in Santa Claus, but we don't. Why? Oh, because it's a fake story.
Yeah.
Just tell them the truth at their level, you know, at
So,
their child's level.
So the protective factor would be for us to be honest and open and educate our children about the realities of, you know, different aspects of our culture, our religious beliefs, and things like that. Yeah, I completely agree with that. We need to be able to respond and not beat around the bush or not even blow it off, you know, like, oh, that's just, you know, a fake story. Like really, depending on age and what's appropriate, get down into the details so that we're educating them about what's going on in the world. Good. Thank you.
You don't have to, because they are kids, they're growing up. You can tell them nicely. It's not like because they're celebrating Santa Claus, they are bad people. They are not bad people, but you know what? The story is not real.
Right.
Just tell them since they are growing up like that, they know, oh, okay, you already put it in their minds, and they start thinking, okay, it's not real, so it's just a man, you know?
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So we understand some of the challenges. There's also sacrifices that we as parents make and our youth have to make as they go through this acculturation process. And again, I really want us to continue to think about this not only from our perspective, but from our youth's perspective, so that again, we can meet them at their level, we can meet them where they're at emotionally, socially, so that we can really be there for them if we understand what their experience might be as well as our own, okay? Moving forward, so let's talk about the acculturation gap. And the acculturation gap, if we define that again, is where youth and their parents are at different stages or pace of acculturation. So we as parents, maybe we are, let's say we are fully acculturated, right? We are at that middle, we're at the cake is baked stage. But perhaps our youth are not, or vice versa. Like we're still trying to figure out, we're like, what is going on in this world? What is Facebook? What is social media? Like we're still trying to figure it out. And our youth are like, oh yeah, I already know about that, right? They're just moving forward in a lightning, speed away from us. And that generally happens if we think about specifically the topic of immigration and families that immigrate from another place. The children will historically, research has shown, move at a lightning pace and acculturate a lot faster than the grown-ups will, the grown-ups in their life will. I would argue that this transfers to different ways in which we acculturate if we're not talking about an immigration issue, right? Children are very flexible, they're very resilient, their brains are very elastic, and they move a lot quicker, literally and metaphorically, than we do, and so they acculturate faster than we do. And that results in a lot of situations an acculturation gap, and there are definite problems associated with that acculturation gap when the parents and the children are kind of not on the same page. Some of those examples, number one is family conflict. Right? That goes without speaking, that there is going to be some family conflict when our youth and the parents are at different levels of acculturation. So that might look like, a youth wants to wear shorts and they feel like, why can't I wear shorts? This is what everybody does. This is, this is the sameness, right? That can look like our children wanting to, go out and date is a huge, conversation topic. So it will look like a lot of things that result in family conflict. One, I feel like the biggest fear that I've heard or that we have as parents is that drift. Like if that I don't hold on to them or prepare them or protect them, that they will drift away. They will drift away from either the family, they will drift away from our, ethnic culture, they will drift away from Islam, right? They're going to drift. That is a huge, and it's a reality. It does happen. And so we need to be prepared for that and hopefully think of, together maybe some strategies in which we can combat that. There are language and communication challenges with families that are acculturating at different levels. So the most obvious example is literal language in terms of if you have, speaking specifically to the immigration issue, children are going to pick up language a lot faster than an adult will. And so if there are communication challenges, and what happens a lot, unfortunately, in cultures is that the youth lose that language. And they, maybe just speak. You see this a lot with, I have friends that I ask them, oh, do you speak Spanish? And they're like, no, I wasn't, I didn't learn it, or I wasn't taught Spanish. As I was growing up, and now they feel that very deeply, but there is a loss sometimes of language, or there are just communication challenges with families and youth. Their expectations are different with children and parents or in family relationships. So one of the things that we tend to see in communities, especially in spiritual communities and minority ethnic communities, is there is a sense of collectivism. However, the mainstream culture has a spirit of or sense of more individualistic way of being and living. And so there is that, again, causes family conflict because it stresses the family relationships. The parenting style. So we talked a little bit about this in terms of there's a discord between parents and children. So you may come from a very authoritative family structure in terms of your family culture, meaning your parents were very authoritative, like this, and that's the way it is in our house, right? Whereas your children maybe are being raised in a more just permissive society, and they're like, Jimmy Joe's parents let him walk to the store all the time by himself, or they let them, go to the park by himself, or he can spend the night at, so and so's house. That's not a problem. Like, why is it such a problem with you? You will face that. That it will happen where there's going to be just differences in your family parent, how you want to parent, as well as how your children want to be parented, will cause a sense of discord. There are there's a lot of research where there are impairments in children's adjustment and growth as a result of the acculturation gap. And, often we see those challenges in like mental health concerns. There's a correlation with the acculturation gap and depression in youth and anxiety. And so if we think back around like what we talked about in terms of the stressors that our youth are facing, some of the sacrifices that they have, or, the fear of missing out and things like that, as a result of impairments in their mental health or challenges with mental health. We also see behavioral challenges where, kids will just act out because of that differences in, let's say specifically, parenting styles. So you may, come from again, authoritarian, background, and you have to be, home, or you don't go, and, you don't go to, someone brought up once, we don't go to mixed gender parties, and you don't go to, you don't spend the night, I'm not allowed to spend the night at someone else's house, even of the same sex, right? Because I don't know their parents, I don't know depending on, the family structure, that is a challenge. And so what we do see is a lot of behavioral problems. There's a lot of research around behavior problems that result as a result of the acculturation challenges or that acculturation gap. There also impact to academic achievement. And then again, that, seems a little bit on par with if there are mental health challenges like depression or anxiety or other mental health challenges or behavioral challenges, academics will also soon follow or are impacted as well by that acculturation gap. Religious practices. So we see this where, especially, during adolescence, where they, children will rebel, or they don't want to, they may not want to pray, or they don't want to go to the masjid. They don't want, in some situations, they don't want any part of being Muslim because, of how they, interpret that and how that is interpreted by the mainstream culture, right? In terms of being here in America, but there definitely impacts to religious practices, social relationships, identity issues, in terms of, especially during adolescence, this is a time where they're really trying to figure out who they are and what they believe in and what the world means to them. And so if they are in situations where they're not on the same page in terms of acculturation and assimilation as their family of origin, it can really stress a young person and result in some identity issues. And those, again, bleed into other things like social relationships as well as religious practices. So these are some of the impacts or problems that are associated with when young people and parents are just, and this is not saying that you have to always be in the same stage of acculturation, because more than likely that is not going to be the case. You're always going to be probably in different stages of acculturation. These are some of the problems associated with that. Any questions about that? Okay. So then the last thing that I want to do is, given that, so we understand what acculturation, the acculturation gap is and some of the challenges associated with it. We know some of the challenges associated with just the process itself of acculturation, and we know some of the protective factors. What can we do as parents? What can we do to help our young people manage the acculturation gap or the acculturation process? So what I'd like for you to do is just maybe by row or by just group yourselves into groups and talk about, what are some of the strategies, what are some of the things that we can do, taking this information about like, hey, this is what is going on. What are some of the ways that we can help our young people manage or navigate this process? And I really want you to think small. Not big. I want you to think on a micro level, like specifically, like what can you do on a day-to-day basis? What are some of the ways in which we can help our youth manage this process? So we're going to take maybe about 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back and we'll share. So if you can just kind of group yourselves geographically and discuss this topic, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll share, and then I'll pass out these sheets, and then we'll have time for any questions, lingering questions that you may have about this topic or just mental health challenges overall, as I am a mental health professional. Okay? All right. So go ahead, take 5 minutes to discuss. What are you going to do about this? You have someone that can take notes. I have some big paper here if you need extra paper, because I will like you to share out after you've finished. Sarah. Would you be able to pass these out once they're done talking?
Sure.
Thank you.
In the meantime,
Yes.
so I don't get anything wrong, I'm just writing a little summary
Okay.
on what you talked about. Was that yours? Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
So my computer's a little annoying because the trackpad's not working.
No problem.
But you just want to edit.
Okay.
Thanks. And so just give one to everyone, right?
Yeah. Oh. Sarah. Uh-huh. For some reason, I was thinking I was done by 11:30, but I'm like overtime now. I realize. I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh shoot, I have 30 minutes to fill.
That'll be fine. I didn't know they'd be joining another class, so I mean, it's fine.
We're gonna wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah, because we did Q&A in the
Yeah,
past.
exactly. That's why I was like, we don't
But
have
I'm
any.
gonna tell the instructor just so when 5 people come into the class, they want to stay. They want to stay until you're done.
Okay.
And then
I'm so sorry. I'm looking like, wait a minute.
It worked out. Like they were really receptive. So it's like, let it be.
Okay, so I'll wrap this in about I'll shorten the time and then I'll just let them report out and then we'll.
Sounds good.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, perfect. So I'm actually going to shorten the time because I realized that I'm overtime. For some reason, I was thinking I was supposed to go to 11:30. So I'm going to shorten the time. So maybe start to wrap up your conversation. And remember, think specific. Specific. Okay, let's come back. Come on back, come on back. I understand that there's another class that you guys are scheduled to go and take. Okay, so who would like to share first? And we'll just have you just kind of report out what you guys talked about and we'll go from group to group. Okay, so gentlemen, shall we start with you? Yes. May we? Okay. Do you have a representative?
Just two things, actually three things, we
Okay.
discussed. Again, something is communication.
Yes.
Communicate with them. In a simple way.
Yes.
With the logic and simple, and to learn ourselves first, again, like as a role model, we have to learn also to teach them first. And that's what, just the basics.
Okay.
As a parents, we have to know ourselves first, the vision.
Yes.
And we can share with them the basics.
So communication, making sure that we're communicating openly and knowing ourselves and our religion and being able to model what we want in our young people. Thank you. Okay. This group?
We were thinking along the same line.
What he said.
And then what I said earlier, teaching
Yes.
our kids to be proud of who they are.
Yes.
Telling them to trust their instincts.
Yes.
And having clear boundaries.
Boundaries.
Establish them early on so that you're not going back and forth.
Yes.
So you're not confused.
Yes.
And then one thing I've seen is that overcorrecting, because parents were not really, did not practice, then all of a sudden they have kids and then they become more religious. So then it's confusing for kids that, think that didn't apply to their parents and not being applied to them, and there's overzealousness.
Yes.
So that could create a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
So clear.
So good boundaries, encouraging trust and respect for our young people so that they trust themselves. We need to model that. Not being overzealous in our religious practice so that we're modeling balance for them as well. Okay, good. And did I say clear, firm boundaries?
Yeah.
Yes. So that we don't...
We don't do this from the day when you said we don't do this. Provide explanation.
Yes.
The kids really are very receptive.
Yes.
To finding out why.
Yeah, and I think that would be my addition, is that a lot of time we're conditioned to not ask why. I got a lot of because I said so growing up, but you know what? This doesn't really work. That sometimes, yes, it does, but sometimes we need to give them some rationale behind our decision making. Thank you. Next group. Yes, this group here.
We were just kind of talking about sometimes Islam and going to the mosque all the time is too much, especially when it comes to teenagers.
Yes.
It's not fun for them.
Yes.
So we have to learn to accept a little bit of the other society.
Yes.
Not the bad part, but, be a little accepting of other cultures.
Yes, be flexible and accepting. Yes, thank you. I agree. And then lastly, over here.
Every child is different.
Yes.
So don't compare them to, Aisha did it this way.
Yes.
And the child's going to feel pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to communicate that it's okay that they did it that way, but the child's going to do it another way. And we need to accept that as a parent. And then we can communicate and then find a solution.
Yes.
How they're going to do it. Just don't compare children.
Yes, because all children are different. Absolutely. Good. And then the last thing that I would share that nobody mentioned is the parents, you guys always have to try and be on the same page. You're not always going to be on the same page or in agreement, but you need to have a united front kind of with your children or for your children so that they see you as a unit. And that you are in alignment and agreement. And if you're not, then, fuss about it privately and come to some sort of agreement with each other. Okay? Thank you so much for being here. That is the end of my presentation, and I appreciate you, and have a great day.